amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello, listeners. As always, it's wonderful to be with you. My guest today is a remarkable Australian, Robert Innes. Apart from his other huge achievements, which we'll talk about during this segment, Robert owns 34 Olympic torches, an incredibly rare collection that is one of the 5 complete sets of Olympic torches in Australia. A complete set can be defined in multiple ways in the torch collecting community, but is generally understood to be a collection that contains a torch or replica torch from each of the 20 Olympic Games since the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin, where the torch relay was first introduced. However, collecting Olympic torches is only a very small part of Robert's incredible life, which, as I said, we're about to find out more about. Welcome, Robert.
Yeah, welcome to you.
Now, we'll come back to those Olympic torches later, but let's start at the beginning. Where were you born and where did you spend your youth?
Oh, well, I was born in Ipswich and then my family moved to Townsville. So all my youth was in Townsville, all through primary school, and then secondary school was at Ipswich Grammar School. My grandfather went there and my uncle went there, so there was an expectation that I went to Ipswich Grammar School, so I went there as a boarder, and that was in 1972, and then I was there till 1976 doing my schooling year. So.
Right, but then you went on to become a Tennis Australia coach. So tell us, well, for over 40 years, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. Originally, it wasn't actually. Tennis Australia didn't actually control tennis coaching back then.
Right.
There was a Tennis Professionals Association of Australia, so I was a member of it. And then Tennis Australia took over probably 94, 95, something around there. And all the existing tennis coaches were then sort of brought over into the Tennis Australia fold. So, yeah, I was one of those.
Right. And did you have a terrific student that went on to do really well in the tennis world, a Pat Rafter or a
I did coach a guy.
Leighton Hewitt or what?
I coached the Ipswich Grammar first in 1986. And there was a young man there, Heath Denman, and he was he was one of those players that had a backhand that, you know, even coaches came to watch. But he didn't do probably up to everyone's expectation, but he was a very good player, yeah. Right.
It's a difficult world to get into, isn't it? I mean, to be really up there at the very top.
Yeah, look, you know, really I coached at Laughs Tennis Centre for probably best part of 20 years, and the expectations at the start of every season, we used to sit down with the kids I used to coach and say, okay, what do you want out of all this? You know, otherwise we're just hitting tennis balls, you know. So we'd set down goal setting for those kids. Some of them wanted to be, you know, school captain of tennis. You know, some of them wanted to be in the first. Some of them wanted to just play higher level fixtures. So, you know, if you set goals at the start, you've got something to aim at. So that's what we used to do.
And from tennis, you then went into ballroom dancing. And, you know, it's I know you need nimble feet in both, but how on earth did you get into ballroom dancing?
It was sort of one of those funny situations in that I had about 5 girl pals, and one of them said, oh, why don't you come
all at once?
Yeah, we used to.
I know.
We didn't actually go out.
Yep.
As good boy and girlfriend, but I had a Holden station wagon, so we could have 3 in the front and 3 in the back.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
And so we used to go out every Friday, Saturday night, and one of them said, oh, right, let's go along to a ballroom dancing studio. And my first reaction was, you know, do I really want to do that? I was playing sort of tennis and I was playing rugby union and, you know, from Ipswich Grammar School and you know, I had a lot of things on, but I went along and, you know, the remarkable part was that, you know, it was incredible. You know, it was one of those experiences that sort of sets you up through life. And then a girl said, oh, would you like to do competition? So we went into beginner and then went into, and, you know, you graduate through the grades by winning. So, you know, I've always had a very competitive nature, so.
Incredible. And in 1988, you were able to get ballroom dancing into Expo 88.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Where it became the largest entertainment promotion on site at Expo.
Yeah. Very good. Lou Edwards was a family friend. I actually went to school with his son, Mark Edwards, at Ipswich Grammar School.
Yes.
But Lou was always a very good family friend of my parents. And and I was living at home, and I came home and Dad said, right, you're coming to Rotary. And I said, oh, do I really want to go to Rotary? I was in that sort of 20 to 30. And he said, yep, you're coming, Lou's coming, Anyway, so we went along, and Lou was telling us about this upcoming event. This is in about 1986. And he said, in a couple of years' time, we're going to have Expo in Brisbane. And at the end of it, I said, Lou, would it be possible for ballroom dancing to get involved? And so we had to send a letter. So we did that. And I was on the organising committee. There was two folds to it. One is Expo, and it became the biggest, ballroom dancing became the biggest event at Expo, entertainment event.
Yes.
And then the other side was the bicentennial, because in 1988, Australia's bicentennial.
Yes.
We got an award from the Australian government for the bicentennial ballroom dancing competition, and there was a lot of sort of toing and froing, but we actually brought 22 countries out, and it remains the biggest ballroom dancing event held in Australia in its history. So,
isn't that extraordinary? Well, Expo, Sally Ann Atkinson has been my guest on here a couple of times, but Expo certainly put Brisbane on the map, didn't it?
Yeah, it was interesting. A lot of people don't realise that the original entertainment for Expo was designed around young people, like children, like teenagers. They had that up behind Expo. They had a world sort of an entertainment precinct that had sort of rides and stuff. But virtually in the first week, they found out that everything that they had catered for was actually incorrect. They had to rearrange all their entertainment for Expo virtually in the first week, because the people that came weren't children and young people. They were all adults, and everyone embraced it on that basis. So because I was sort of involved with the ballroom dancing, literally they came to us and said, look, we've had to stop people from coming to here because it didn't fit into the scheduling at all.
So, 1988 was a big year for you. You met your wife, Kim, and you helped secure a bicentennial grant from the Australian government to establish the Bicentennial Ballroom Dancing Championships, which was held at the Boondall Entertainment Centre, and to this day is the largest dancing event held in Australia. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was an incredible event. No one had ever done it before. I had retired in 1986 from ballroom dancing, and in 1988... in 1986, we established what it was called the Australian National Amateur Dance Association, and there was a guy, Vince Bain, in New South Wales, and another guy, Tony Tellini, in Western Australia, and myself, and we got together and we said, okay, we're going to establish a National Amateur Dance Association. So we did that, and then that gave the amateurs some direction at that point in time that they could become involved in the planning of events. And I got involved in the planning and running of the Bicentennial Ballroom Dancing Competition, and we sold out Boondall Entertainment Centre Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then we took 70 of the top dancers in the world to Expo on the Saturday night. And we were in the piazza, and, I was standing with the chief organiser of the entertainment, and when they built Piazza, the original design criteria was that there would be 1,000 people seated and 2,000 people standing around the outside. And that night, I actually said to David, how many people do you think they're here? And he goes, there'd have to be 10,000 people here. There was just you have no idea.
Extraordinary.
It was... To see some of I wasn't dancing, but and there was a lot better dancers than me. But the standard of ballroom dancing that we had at that event from all over the world. We had the Bremerhaven World Formation team, and it was just extraordinary.
Spectacular sight it must have been.
It was. It was actually quite funny. The popularity of ballroom dancing at Expo was unexpected. We put the first event on at the Piazza Theatre, and there was probably, 3,000 people around the outside of this thing, and the dancing professional who was actually emceeing the night, he virtually sort of stood up in front of this massive crowd and just virtually sort of became water, which wasn't great. And we had to virtually go and say, well, look, you can't send inexperienced people along here, this is nuts. Like, this is an expectation that we just can't even comprehend at this point in time. So it was pretty good, yeah.
Now, you're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Robert Innes, a remarkable Australian who, apart from achieving so much else, has a rare collection of Olympic torches. Now, tragically, Robert, back in 2007, you sort of described where one part of your life finished and the other part started. Sadly, your daughter, Morgan, was killed, wasn't she, in a tragic accident on Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Yeah.
Sydney Harbour.
Sydney Harbour ferry, Pamburridge, departing Circular Quay at about 11 o'clock at night. It only had the driver and the deckhand on board, struck a 31-foot pleasure craft with, 12 of our friends and my daughter on it. Yeah, so it cut in half.
And you went on after that, though, didn't you, to try and change things on Sydney Harbour and to try to get sort of new rules and regulations brought in that might make it safer. How did you go about doing that, and were you successful at all?
Yeah, one of the problems, if someone said to you today, even today, and said, look, Sydney Harbour ferry, with a very highly trained master on it, would depart Circular Quay and then hit a 31-foot pleasure craft, you probably wouldn't believe them. I know it's happened because it's happened to me. But so really one of the problems I had with it was sort of conceptually trying to work out how something like this could have even occurred. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So when you sort of stood back from it, one of the problems was that you ask questions, and I've always asked questions as I've gone along, and even like if you went to the water police, like on the night of the accident, there was an 8-knot speed limit inside Circular Quay. And a lot of people might know, but Circular Quay is for commercial vessels only.
Yes.
You can't get a pleasure craft and go into Circular Quay at all. And there's an 8-knot speed limit within Circular. And I said to the police, well, when was the last time you actually checked that everyone was doing? They actually didn't have the ability to check.
No.
No one had ever checked, right? They had an 8-knot speed limit, but no one had ever actually put a speed trap or analysed whether any commercial vessel, whether it's Sydney Ferries or any other vessels, were travelling within that 8-knot speed limit.
It sounds a bit like the Broadwater down the Gold Coast, where there's a 6-knot speed limit, but they go about 15 knots.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And there was another rule that was in play on the night of the accident called the North-South rule. And when you come out of Circular Quay, vessels are supposed to go out and travel to the centre V in the centre of the Harbour Bridge and then turn left.
Right.
So that's a straight out turn left. It's a sharp turn. And I mean, the Pamburridge on that night actually went into a bank turn, so it actually, which is more comfortable for everyone on board, but it put them in, like it was a bank turn, and then put them on the starboard side of the Marinda.
Yes.
And that, once they're on the starboard side, even though they shouldn't technically be there, you've got to give way to this vessel. So, there was all those complexities that related to this accident. And, it was an unlimited speed limit under the Harbour Bridge. It was, there was a lot of discussion over whether it was classified as a narrow area of the harbour. And, but it is a narrow area because that's where the Harbour Bridge goes across.
I have sailed there and realised, yes, it is very narrow.
And you've got large commercial vessels still going up and down that area at high speed.
Exactly. Yes.
So, and probably about 6 weeks before Morgan's accident, there was another accident on Sydney Harbour where a Sydney Harbour ferry departing Luna Park, which is over the other side, had struck a guy who was fishing to the west side of the Harbour Bridge.
Right.
And, it's probably not the best area to fish in because it's of the traffic and the narrowness of the area and whatever. But there was nothing illegal about what he did. And when I got into discussions with Sydney Ferries at that time, I said to them, well, okay, you can't talk to me about Morgan's accident because you're illegal, whatever, but let's just talk about what happened with the Dawn Fraser accident, which was the 6 weeks before. What did you do the
Dawn
next...
Fraser, of course, being the ferry, Dawn Fraser.
Dawn Fraser. There was a guy, Peter Keratis, and he's fishing with his son on a dinghy. Boat's coming back early in the morning. There was sun involved. They couldn't see. And I said to the guy from Ferries, okay, well, what did you do the next day? After you struck this vessel and Peter Keratis didn't die instantly, he died 8 days later of a stroke, which is terrible, Yeah. And I said, what did you do the next day? And, they really did nothing. They said that they were waiting for the ongoing investigation.
Yeah.
And those investigations take years, And I said, well, that's unacceptable to me. One of the, Peter Keratis was the uncle of somebody, the grandfather of somebody, the husband of somebody, the brother of somebody, father of somebody. And, out of respect for his death, they actually didn't do anything the next day, because there could have been someone else fishing there because it wasn't illegal.
Exactly.
It is now, but it wasn't illegal the next day.
But you certainly did something because you then set up the Morgan Innes Foundation, and through this foundation, with the assistance of the Australian Sports Foundation, you provided 2 large monetary annual scholarships for 10 years, the Morgan Innes Queensland Scholarship and the Alan Blinn and Simone Moore National Scholarship.
Yeah.
This is when you were recognised for your efforts and were selected as a remarkable Australian in the national competition and represented Australia as one of 80 torchbearers in Canberra for the Beijing 2008 Olympics. Is this when your interest in Olympic torches began?
Yeah, well, what happened, the Morgan Innes Foundation, people would see it now, one of the problems that you have is when you're in the media, you get offered interviews and much like we're doing now, but at the time they were offering us money to do those interviews, and I didn't really want to take anything from Morgan's death. So
exactly. Or understandable, I should say. Yes.
Yeah. So I put all that money into an account, and we set up the charity, and in that there was probably about $200,000, I suppose, in that account at the start, and 2 other dear friends of mine. They're accountants, and I'm an accountant. So between the 3 of us, we set up a charity, and the 2 cheques that we'd write every year, one for the audit and one to the Australian Sports Foundation, gave those 2 scholarships. You can change a kid's life with lots of money, and we're giving away $10,000 or $5,000 scholarships. You don't change it with little bits. And my expectation on that was that we would extinguish the fund fairly quickly. Skating was in need of some funding at that point in time to help young athletes go and train overseas and whatever.
Can I just interrupt for a second there? Because Morgan, in actual fact, was a very good ice skater, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was Queensland champion a couple of years prior to the accident. She was at that cusp of being... She was already very good, but whether she became elite, that was sort of in the air a little bit at that time. So in 2008, I was contacted by Lenovo and they said, look, you've been selected as one of the torchbearers. Really, I ran for Morgan.
I can understand that, yes. But is that where your sort of real interest in torches? Because you've gone on from there now, haven't you, to have this incredible collection, which fortunately you sort of open up to the public every now and then, and particularly to school children. And it's a wonderful collection that you've got.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's marvellous how, you talk about sort of spirit and stuff floating around. We came back from running in Beijing, for the Beijing Olympics, and we were invited to one of Morgan's friends' 15th birthdays, which is incredibly hard, but we went. And Monica was there, and I took the torch along because I was the torchbearer. This was in April, and we just got back.
Yes.
Anyway, and I said, well, does anyone want to see the Olympic torch from, Beijing? And I brought it out, and people having photographed with the torch at this birthday party. for Monica. And her mother, Elizabeth, said, "Did you know my father was in 3 torch relays?" And I said, how did he ever do that? It's hard enough to get into 1, never mind 3.
Yeah.
But indeed, George, which is Monica's grandfather, was in 3 torch relays. So he was in 1956, 2000 and 2004. And I said, has he still got his torches? And she said yes. And I said, well, I've got to go to Camp Hill State School next week because they've invited me back because that's where Morgan went to school. And I said, we may as well take 4 torches rather than 1. How cool would that be? Anyway, so George and I have sort of become fairly good friends. And then in 2008, we did a whole stack of interviews, of these torch presentations with 4 torches, his 3 and my 1. And we went to schools and we did all those things. Anyway, I was contacted by when the athletes came back, they were doing a ticker tape parade in Queen Street. Anyway, it all got a little bit complicated because I'm a torchbearer. I'm not really an athlete. Anyway, I said, well, look, don't worry. We'll just stand in the crowd. We'll just go along. So we actually stood in the crowd with 4 Olympic torches next to when the athletes came back.
Right.
And people would walk past and they'd say, well, what's that? And I said, an Olympic torch. And they said, rubbish. And I said, no, it really is an Olympic torch. And people said, can we hold it? And yes. And we became this sort of little precinct with 4 Olympic torches. And a lady came along, and that was probably the motivation for all the rest of it. The lady came along and said, what's that? And I said, well, that's a Melbourne 1956 Olympic torch. And she said, can I hold it? And I said, yeah. Anyway, so she's standing there. She's got this thing. She's gripped. It's right in front of her face. And she started to cry.
Right.
Tears streaming.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said, look, you really got to catch me up a little bit here. I just don't get it. And she said she had lost to Betty Cuthbert in the lead up to the 1956 Olympics.
Really?
And she had been married, and this is the first thing she'd ever held.
Oh, isn't that incredible? And so how many have you got now?
I've actually got 42, 43 actually.
Will you be getting one after the last Olympics, another one?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated. If the listeners want to write into the AOC and encourage them to give me one, that'd be great. There's only 2,000 torches for Paris and there's 11,000 torch runners, torchbearers. So it'll be difficult. Australia's got 5 Olympic torch sets. There's one held by the Greek community in Victoria. There's another one by the AOC, which is Australian Olympic Committee. There's another one on the Gold Coast, which belonged to a fellow, Victor, who's a very good friend of mine. And Victor had another full set and he donated to Bond University, so it's behind glass at Bond University. There's another set being accumulated for the 2032 Olympics, which will go into the main stadium, wherever that main stadium might be. And then there's mine. And so the 4 sets are pretty well behind glass, unavailable, and I've got a full set. I've taken it a little bit further in that you were saying before about 20, well, that's fine up to Paris. So we're now at 21 Olympics, and there's 21 Olympics. There's 26 Olympic torches for those 21 Olympics. Of course, Mexico had 6 torches. And a lot of people mightn't realise that the 1956 Olympics, which was held in Melbourne, was a dual host city. Did you know we hosted it with Stockholm?
Oh, right. No.
And the reason for that was that the equestrian events had to be held overseas because we had strict quarantine rules in Australia.
Of course, yes.
So there is an actual Olympic torch somewhere that has got Stockholm written on it, which is exactly the same as the Melbourne one. But there would only be one, and there was only they held that torch relay on horseback, and there was only 22 people in it. So in the lead up to Stockholm in June. So we held the equestrian events in June, and then the main event in November in Melbourne.
So I presume the Olympic torch also sort of for the Paralympics as well? Or,
Well, no. There's a set of Paralympic torches as well. There's a set of Winter Olympic torches.
Yes.
I have 10 of Winter Olympic torches, as well as the other ones that I've got for the summer. Given that Morgan was a figure skater, I sort of went down the path. Originally, I wasn't collecting them, but then, we sort of got the one for Morgan because she would have been angling for either depending on age and whether she got there or not,
Yes.
probably Vancouver 2010 or Sochi 2014 were probably the two, that she would be viable for. Her friend Chelsea Lee, who was a New South Wales champion, she went to Vancouver.
Oh, right.
And so she actually got selected for Australia for Vancouver.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Apart from speaking in clubs and business groups, you mentor in schools on a weekly basis for charity, Inspiring Brighter Futures Foundation. And in 2021, your charity work was acknowledged when you became the Lord Mayor's Australia Day Senior Volunteer of the Year.
Yeah, it was nice to be acknowledged. I don't do it for that acknowledgement. The Inspiring Brighter Futures, which is an incredible program. They go into schools, and the school counsellors, they actually select people to sit down one-on-one with us for 8 weeks, and they have a program where they teach values and goal setting and, create vision statements for these kids. And, there's a whole community where some of these kids have fairly difficult lives, and we try to make it a little bit better.
And I'm sure you do.
Yeah, look, there's, one of the things I think I'm pretty good at it, but, there's some incredible women that get involved in these programs. And, when you read their resumes, you go, mine pales into insignificance against some of these other people that get involved. But, I help as best I can.
And through it all, Robert, you keep Morgan's image alive, don't you? Which is
well, I try. We don't talk about, we talk about it, obviously, we talk about it here, but, when I go to schools, it's really not about that.
No.
One of the, I have a comprehensive collection of Olympic torches with the winter ones, which go back to 98. Children at schools, I can go, if they're born on an off Olympic year, I can go either side of them with a winter and a summer torch. And, when I go up to someone, it gives me something to talk to them about. I can sort of go, well, when were you born? And everyone has that in their DNA. So literally they'll say, well, look, I was born in 2011, and I can go either side with Vancouver and London.
How lovely.
So it's pretty cool.
Terrific. So listeners, as you've just heard, Robert is an amazing Australian, and I thank him so much for being our guest today. To learn more about Robert, just Google Robert Innes, is that right? And Olympic torches, and lots comes up. Or I suppose you could contact us here at 4RPH and we could put you in touch with Robert.
Yeah, look, I still do torch presentations. I was actually supposed to do one this morning, but the school's going to do it fourth term, and we've got one on Friday. I have a philosophy, if someone invites me, I try to get along. So
that's lovely. And we're very, very grateful for you, Kim, but sadly we've run out of time.
Yep.
So I can't talk to you anymore now, but we might get you back another time at some stage.
That'd be a pleasure.
And thank you again.
No worries. Thank you,
listeners.
Rosemary. Bye.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.